Hello, good evening, Mr. Hiren, Dr. Shakti. Dr. Akila, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I think we can start.
Yeah. Yes, sir. I think we can start. It's 6 minutes.
I think the YouTube streaming, there is some issue.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was just wondering. Anyhow, recording is okay. On that, we'll start then.
Yes.
It's 6:05. Yeah. Greetings and good evening to one and all. On behalf of the organizing units, Hindustan Chamber of Commerce, IEEE Computer Society, ACM, and Computer Society of India, I have great pleasure in extending a warm welcome to our today's speaker, Mr. Dhruv Mangal, members of organizing units, and my colleagues from the organizing units, and the delegates joined the meeting through Google Meet, and those who are planning to watch live through the streaming through YouTube. E-commerce is one of the most disruptive application which has impacted the retail business across the globe. India is no exception, but the growth, which was relatively slow, got fueled due to increased internet penetration and the improved digital payment ecosystem. However, the organized e-commerce is relatively lower when compared to kirana shops serving people at the near home segment. They are yet to adapt to e-commerce and get benefits of the larger volumes of sales. Since the current e-commerce is based on the concept of platforms and marketplaces, some issues like monopoly and higher sales commission are hindering the large number of sellers to adopt e-commerce. ONDC is aimed to remove such anomalies, which will benefit the major stakeholders such as buyers, sellers, and technology solution providers. ONDC was conceptualized by seasoned IT professionals headed by Mr. Nandan Nilankani, the architect of Aadhaar. It is hoped that ONDC will revolutionize e-commerce in the years to come. The presentation of today by Mr. Dhruv Mangal will provide an in-depth understanding of the ONDC concept, including its objective, principles, and what it means to move from platform-centric model to an open network model. It will also cover the roles that any participant can play on the network and the benefits that it offers to buyers, sellers, and technology providers. With this brief welcome note and the introduction to the topic of today's presentation, let me request my colleague Mr. Hiran B. Shah, the co-chair of Expert Committee on Information Technology at Hindustan Chamber of Commerce and past chairman of CSA Chennai, to formally introduce the speaker, Mr. Dhruv Mangal. Over to Mr. Hiran.
Thank you, Mr. Mohan, for the welcome address. Friends and guests, it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Dhruv Mangal to all of us here. Mr. Dhruv Mangal is currently the project director for network expansion at ONDC, which is Open Network for Digital Commerce. He is an alumni of BITS Pilani and has over 12 years of experience working in consulting assignments at EY, where he has worked on multiple digital initiatives of most of the Government of India projects. He has been part of ONDC for almost a year now and supports new participants in onboarding the network. We are all eagerly awaiting to listen from Mr. Dhruv Mangal how this, if I may use the word, life-changing moment for Indian kirana store owners will actually benefit both the public and the small-time shopkeepers, because the biggest flag that was received when the e-commerce picked off was that the small corner shop kirana holder may or may not survive. but we've seen in the past that the survival has been very good. So we look forward to Mr. Dhruv Mangal's talk on how ONDC is going to help everybody. Thank you one and all for joining in, and over to you, Mr. Dhruv Mangal.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mohan, Mr. Shah, and thank you for providing me this opportunity to take everybody through the concept of ONDC. I think, as you rightfully said, this was a project which was conceptualized by the Ministry of Commerce about 1.5 years ago, and there's been tremendous progress that's happened over the last year on this initiative. And that's what I'm going to present to you. I think there's a lot of, while a lot of information is available in the public domain, not a lot of people understand what the whole concept of ONDC is, and that's what I'm going to spend some time doing today. Is my screen visible to everybody?
No.
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 No?
Not yet.
Oh, is it? Okay, just give me 1 second.
You have to pin that screen.
Yeah, I think it's coming up now.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see that now.
Okay, great. So, like Mr. Mohan said, this project got conceptualized pretty much by the Ministry of Commerce back during the pandemic, when they largely realized that the retail value chain in India was completely missing from e-commerce. And some of the numbers that you essentially see on the screen here also indicate that. If you look at the total number of Kirana stores in India, you've got about 1.2 crores. Back in 2020, you had only about 15,000 of them, which were, e-commerce enabled. Also, if you look at the larger e-commerce, GMV as compared to the retail GMV of India, it was only 4.3% in 2020. In 2021, it grew to about 7 to 8% due to the boost that the pandemic gave it. But it is still significantly lower than some of the countries like China, South Korea, UK, where it's pretty much, close to the 25% mark. Now, which essentially shows that in a country like India, there is still humongous potential for growth of e-commerce, especially in tier 2, tier 3 cities. So the pandemic has given quite a lot of boost to e-commerce, but a large part of this has been concentrated to large cities. And how do we take this to the smaller towns and rural areas is what ONDC is trying to target. And therefore, the goal that ONDC has set for itself over the next 5 years is manifold. So one is to really double the gross GMV of digital transactions that are happening in the country today. Significantly expand the coverage of retailers who are using digital commerce. So from the 15,000 ones, take it up to 20 lakh retailers. Also expand the share of Indians who are using e-commerce as buyers. Currently, that number stands at about 9 crores, but take it to more than 25 crores, and really look at amplifying the geographic coverage of e-commerce. There is a reason that ONDC believes that they can do this in the next 5 years. We can do this in the next 5 years is because we don't plan to do this alone as a single platform, but work with e-commerce platforms across the country in order to achieve these targets. And that's the concept that ONDC is built on, to work with an entire ecosystem of platforms and connect them to e-commerce and make them interoperable. Of course, I'm going to go into more details of that when I later in the presentation. If you look at why ONDC was set up and what were the challenges that it's trying to address, when the ministry started looking, they realized that a large part of the that there are very limited choices for sellers to be e-commerce enabled today. If you look at it, there are two methods by which a seller can go online. The first method is for them to join a platform, let's say an Amazon or a Flipkart, for the lack of a better example, in which case they have to agree to all the terms and conditions that the platform set on them, be it the kind of returns policy, cancellation policy, delivery time, or be it the be it the transaction cost that they will charge on every transaction that is taking place through them. Now, this alone limits the number of retailers who can really be a part of the platform, because they can't meet all the terms and conditions which are set by these platforms. The second method is for somebody to develop their own e-commerce storefront or an e-commerce website, in which case they have to spend a lot of money in getting buyers to come and purchase through them, which itself becomes a very expensive affair. And therefore, discoverability beyond these larger e-commerce platforms is a major challenge for a large part of the buyers and sellers in the country. Now, the other challenge which was also realized was that there are very limited opportunities for small e-commerce players today to be present in the market. This was because any e-commerce platform has to stitch the entire e-commerce value chain together, from customer acquisition to seller acquisition to logistic, warehousing, payment. You need to bring that entire value chain together, which is again a very expensive investment. And the ROI on these investments take place over a long period of time, and therefore there are very limited opportunities for small e-commerce players to exist. And therefore, ONDC has been designed around two interrelated principles. The first one is unbundling. So what happens in ONDC is that the e-commerce value chain is unbundled into various components, and different platforms play different roles on the network. What this means is there is a buyer. Sorry, just give me a second. Sorry. So what this means is that there is a buyer platform that is responsible for buyer acquisition and bringing them to the network. There is a seller platform that is responsible for bringing sellers to the network. There is a logistic platform that is responsible for undertaking logistic delivery between a buyer and a seller. And any one platform only has to play one role on the network, while other platforms will end up playing the other role. So that's unbundling. And the second one is interoperability. This essentially means that now that the e-commerce value chain has been unbundled, the platforms have been unbundled, they also need to be made interoperable using something called the ONDC protocol that allows for all of these platforms to be able to communicate and transact with each other. The ONDC protocol is built on the backend protocol as its base foundation, which facilitates commerce-aware communication between various unconnected platforms. This isn't very different from how the SMTP protocol works to connect various email clients. So if there is a sender of an email on Gmail, and there is a receiver of an email on Yahoo, using the SMTP protocol, a Gmail email client is able to talk to a Yahoo email client, and seamlessly for that transaction or for that email to take place between Gmail and Yahoo. In a similar manner, ONDC has developed the ONDC protocol that allows for interoperability and communication between various e-commerce platforms. Now, the e-commerce platforms, of course, get unbundled into two protocols allow for communication and transactions to happen between the buyer platforms and the seller platforms. Now, what does this essentially mean for any consumer or a seller? If you look at the diagram on the left-hand side, is how e-commerce is conducted today. A buyer and a seller need to be registered on the same platform to be able to transact with each other. What this essentially means is, as a seller, I may have to go and register myself on multiple platforms in order for me to access the buyers of those particular platforms. Similarly, as a buyer, I need to also use different platforms. So as a consumer, I'm using Flipkart to place an order for certain products. I may be going to an urban company in order to place to look for a carpenter or an electrician. I may be using another platform like an Uber to book a cab. But for various services, I have different platforms on which I need to register. Now, the diagram on the left-hand side buyer in ONDC could be registered on any ONDC ONDC compliant buyer platform. A seller could register on any ONDC compliant seller platform, and irrespective of the platform that they choose to appear on the network, they will be able to transact with each other. Each buyer and seller needs to register on only one platform, and they become discoverable by the entire ONDC universe. That is the fundamental change that ONDC is bringing to the e-commerce world. Now, if we were to talk a little bit about the architecture and how ONDC works, on one side, you've got the buyer platforms that bring buyers to the network. The square box, or rather the rectangle that you see in the center, essentially is the ONDC network that comprises of various e-commerce platforms that have voluntarily chosen to be a part of the ONDC network. You've got the buyer platforms that bring buyers to the network and manage the end-to-end buyer experience. This means a buyer is able to search for a product on this platform. He is able to view all the search results that come back. He is able to view the product display page, add a product to cart, place an order, subsequently track delivery, undertake any returns, cancellation, customer support requirement. The buyer side application acts as a single point of interface for the buyer. On the other side, you've got seller side applications that are responsible for seller acquisition and for managing the end-to-end seller experience. So everything from making the seller catalog available, inventory visible to the buyer, to processing any orders, returning information about the delivery, processing returns, cancellation, customer support. Anything from the seller side experience is the responsibility of a seller application. Now, seller applications can also be of multiple types. There could be aggregators, which are bringing multiple sellers onto the network in one go, whereas there could be individual seller side applications or platforms, individual brands that have their own website that could make their website platforms, e-commerce platforms, ONDC compliant and be visible on the network. There would also be seller-side application for other services such as logistic providers, travel, hospitality, mobility, etc. Now, there are certain services that ONDC provides to the various e-commerce platforms in order to be able to build trust between them and for transactions to happen in this unbundled environment. Of course, there's a registry that ONDC maintains, which has details of all the buyer and seller applications, so that the gateway which enables the transactions between the buyer side application and the seller side application is able to identify the various buyer platforms, seller platforms on the network. There are a set of network policies that ONDC has developed in order to ensure healthy transactions take place on the network. These are programmable network policies in order to maintain the healthy transactions. There's a scoring and badging mechanism which has been developed for all buyers, sellers, buyer app, seller app on the network, again, in order to build more trust and between these disconnected entities so that they are able to transact with each other. Now, how a transaction takes place on the ONDC network is that when a buyer searches for a particular product on the buyer application, that particular search request hits the ONDC gateway that checks the ONDC registry for all the seller applications that are able to cater to that particular search request. So depending on the domain as well as the location in certain categories, the gateway would then broadcast this particular search request to all the seller applications that can cater to it. It would then collate all the search results that come from the seller application, and send it back to the buyer application for display to the buyers. Now, once a buyer selects a particular product, and let's say wants to look at the product display page, that particular transaction becomes a bilateral transaction between the buyer application and the seller application, and all subsequent steps of the transaction, e-commerce transaction, also remain bilateral transactions between the buyer app and seller app. Of course, using the ONDC protocol, but not hitting the ONDC gateway. So they become one-on-one transactions between the buyer app and seller app once a product has been selected. So ONDC also maintains an open data ledger where they collect, where we collect data from the buyer apps and seller apps just to be able to maintain or to be able to basically be aware of the number of transactions and the health of the network. There is also a payment processor that ONDC has developed. Again, in this system, payments can be collected by either the buyer application or the seller application, and it needs to be settled with all other entities which are a part of the network, because a buyer app also charges certain amounts on a transaction. A seller app, of course, also charges, and a seller has to be ultimately paid for the products that they are providing. So there is a common payment processor that ONDC has developed, again, in order to build trust and make sure that payment settlements happen on time between these various disconnected entities. So the objective of these network services are essentially to build trust between these disconnected entities and to make sure that transactions happen in a healthy manner. Now, what does a transaction look like in the ONDC world? This is just one example of an unbundled interoperable transaction on the network. I'll just start by saying that this is not the only way that a transaction can take place on ONDC, but just one of the ways. So let's say Vijay logs into Paytm, which is one of the first applications that has gone live as a buyer application on the network. Vijay logs into Paytm and searches for options to buy atta. This request hits the ONDC gateway that checks the multi-domain registry and broadcasts this search to all the grocery seller nodes that are available on the network. In an ideal world, you would get multiple search results, but let's say in this example, there are two seller apps that respond. There is Gupta Kirana Store, which wants to provide atta at INR 50 without delivery. There's Big Basket, which is ready, which is an aggregator getting fulfilled by the modern Kirana store in the background, which is ready to offer atta at INR 150 with delivery. Now, Vijay thinks that he's going to be able to arrange for delivery at less than 100 rupees and therefore chooses to place an order for atta through Gupta Kirana store without delivery. Now, the same application, Paytm, allows Vijay to search for delivery services on the network. Again, the gateway will check the multi-domain registry and broadcast the search, in this case, to all the delivery seller nodes. He is informed that there are two delivery services available, Dunzo, which will do the delivery at INR 50, Goodbox, another delivery service, which is ready to do it at INR 70 between him and the seller. He selects Dunzo for delivery. He is now told by Paytm that he needs to make a payment of INR 100. 50 rupees goes for delivery and 50 rupees for the atta. So this is a very, very unbundled version of how a transaction can potentially take place. It's also possible that the buyer application does not want the consumer to be searching for delivery services on the network. Being aware that Gupta Kirana store has offered atta without delivery, in the background, the buyer application can automatically search for delivery services on the network, add the cost of delivery, and showcase the cost of atta with delivery to the buyer while checking out. So there is no need for Vijay alone to be selecting or searching for delivery services on the network. It completely depends on the user and on the buying experience that the buyer app, which is Paytm, wants to design for its buyer. Similarly, given that the seller does not have his own delivery services, the seller application could actually allow the seller to search for delivery services on the network and showcase the cost of its product along with the cost of delivery. And at the time when the user confirms the order to the seller, it in the background places an order for delivery on the network, and there can be a cascaded transaction that takes place for the product as well as the delivery services. So various such permutation combinations are essentially possible on the network. It completely depends on the kind of experience that each of these applications, these buyer applications and the seller applications, want to develop for their end users. Now, in this particular example, there was various roles that some of these entities played on the network. When I explained Paytm in this particular example acted as a retail buyer application because it allowed an individual to be able to transact with Kirana stores on the network. You had Gupta Kirana store playing the role of a retail seller application because it was offering its products and services on the network. In the example where Vijay was able to search for logistic services on the Paytm application, Paytm also acted as a logistic buyer application. In case Gupta Kirana store was searching for logistic services on the network, then it would be Gupta Kirana store which was acting as a logistic buyer application. And of course, Dunzo Goodbox played the role of a logistic seller application on the network. There is also Gateway, which is another participant on the network, which is the application that allows for the multicasting of the search request to take place from the buyer app and seller app. And then, of course, the collation of the results and sending it back to the application for display to the buyers. Now, there are various roles, therefore, on the network that any entity can play. Large e-commerce platforms can act as both buyer applications as well as seller applications. A seller application, we already spoke about an example where it could play the role of a logistic buyer application. And therefore, ONDC has to be thought of as multiple interconnected networks with a buyer side role and a seller side role. In the example that we spoke about, there was the retail network and there was the logistic network. Similarly, we are also building a wholesale network where retailers could place orders from distributors who would start acting as sellers on the network. In which case, a retailer should be able to, a retailer could use a single application and sell their products to end consumers and be able to also purchase from distributors using the same application. And therefore, ONDC has to be thought of as multiple such interconnected networks with one application being able to play multiple roles on it, either on the buyer side or on the seller side. We started off with grocery and food and beverages as the initial categories that we went live with. But now we are also in the process of expanding the network to other product categories, including electronics, fashion, agriculture, home and kitchen. We also have two other networks, wholesale and B2B, which I spoke about, where distributors would be able to sell their products to retailers. We also have a similar pilot ongoing in mobility, which is currently live in Kochi, called the Kochi Open Mobility Network, where there are multiple cab aggregators on one side and multiple buyer applications through which you can place, you can book a cab ride similar to how you would do it on Uber, but the supply side being managed by multiple different cab aggregators. So the concept of ONDC applies to any e-commerce transaction that includes a buyer and a seller and a product that can be cataloged. And the idea is to expand the use cases to each of these segments as we move on. The ultimate objective with ONDC being that any domain that can be cataloged and can be transacted on ONDC, the use case that we want to develop is that suppose there is a person who's looking to do a short-term assignment in Kerala, he's looking for a suitcase, flight tickets, service apartment, a language course. Today, he needs to go to various platforms in order to be able to transact. There may be a marketplace that he goes to buy the suitcase, a travel portal for flight tickets, looking for accommodation on a different portal. 4 checkouts happening on 4 different platforms. But with ONDC, he should be able to do one single checkout, add each of these products into his cart, and be able to avail all these services through a single portal itself. Now, there are various benefits that ONDC offers to participants which were not possible before. For buyers, it means that there is a single platform access to all domains and access to all sellers in each of the domains. And therefore, it is very, very easy for any platform to be able to build a unified experience for their consumers. And by simply plugging onto the network, getting access to the entire seller network all in one go. With the wide availability of sellers, there are wider options for prices, delivery, etc., which will be available on the network. Also, one of the differentiation that we feel ONDC will create for buyers is that today, if you look at e-commerce platforms, their biggest USP is the seller base that they are able to create, on their respective platforms. But with ONDC, every buyer application will have access to all sellers. And therefore, what they will have to really concentrate on to differentiate themselves is to build the right user experiences and create a key differentiator there. So enable their buyers to make the right choices and purchase correctly from the network. Therefore, buyer experiences will automatically improve on the network. And that is going to be a key differentiator that we see panning out on the network for buyers. For sellers, ONDC means discoverability by the entire buyer universe by maintaining one-time single registration. So any seller can join any large or small seller application and be a part of the network. And they don't need to join different applications. They become discoverable to the buyers on all buyer platforms. It also means a low-cost access to the complete value chain. So the various services that other platforms or complementary platforms are providing on the network, be it buyer acquisition cost, be it the logistic cost, they will provide it at scale. And therefore, sellers will be able to avail this at a lower cost than what they would have been able to manage by themselves on other platforms. Also, the protocol by default allows complete autonomy on the terms and conditions that a seller wants to set to be able to transact on the network. Be it the terms and conditions that they set for returns, for cancellation. The protocol allows for complete autonomy for the seller to set these themselves. Of course, there are also opportunities for greater business analytics. Just as an example, a seller application would receive all search requests that are made in a particular domain or for a particular category. And therefore, there is insights that it can provide to the seller on what kind of products are being searched on the network so that sellers are able to stock up on the products that are currently not available with them. So such analytics opportunities will also get enhanced, and it'll be up to the seller platforms to be able to provide this. One of the other benefits that any seller would have is that they can easily migrate from one seller platform to the other because of the network-wide reputation that we will be maintaining. So the ratings and review system on the network will be network-wide. They will be stored at ONDC. And therefore, if a seller moves from one seller platform to the other, their ratings, their reviews, etc., will be maintained and will be available with the seller. And therefore, the seller does not get tied down to one seller platform once they join the network. Now, for technology companies, ONDC offers maximum value on their technology. What this means is that if there is a application which has a lot of consumers, and the platform wants those consumers to become e-commerce consumers, then they can join the network as a buyer application. So we see a lot of banking applications, telecom applications, payment applications wanting to play the role of a buyer application on ONDC because they already have a large set of consumers. And for them to convert them into e-commerce consumers is much simpler than for any platform which is trying to acquire consumers from scratch. Any entity that believes that their strength is on developing a seller network and onboarding sellers on the network, then that is the role that they can play on the network. There are a lot of POS companies, for example, that are developing seller applications on top of their POS applications in order to enable e-commerce for their sellers on the network. There are, of course, monetization opportunities that exist for each one of the entities, be it on the buyer side or on the seller side. And lastly, it takes about 6 to 8 weeks for any entity to be able to integrate with the network. And once they are a part of the network, they have access to the entire buyer universe, seller universe, depending on the role that they're playing. And therefore, the time to really scale is reduced significantly as well. Just a couple of clarifications on what ONDC is and what it is not. ONDC itself is an open network. It is not an application or a platform. ONDC is a network that allows other e-commerce platforms and applications to essentially become interoperable. It also eliminates the need for any central intermediary. ONDC itself is not an enabler for e-commerce expansion. It's an enabler, sorry, but it is not a medium to help digitize businesses. Seller applications on the ONDC network have to play this role and help bring small sellers, big sellers to the network. Also, ONDC is not a regulator, so we ourselves are bound by the e-commerce rules, IT rules, which are prevalent on any e-commerce entity in the country. Of course, we get to work with a lot of, given that this project was initiated by the Ministry of Commerce, we work very closely with them and are also providing our inputs on how some of these policies can be modified for truly democratizing e-commerce in India. But we ourselves are not a regulator. That role is played by the Ministry of Commerce and the respective other ministries in the network. Now, we are a market and community-led initiative. This means that for any new developments that we do on the network, we work very closely with the set of platforms that have already joined with us. And any product roadmap, protocol developments that end up happen with the consultation of the community that we have currently working with us. Of course, this project is strongly supported by the Ministry of Commerce. It is one of the key initiatives that is monitored by Shri Piyush Goyal and strongly supported by DPIIT. I think Mr. Mohan already spoke about how ONDC is guided by a very strong advisory council, including Mr. Nandan Nilekani, who is a part of it. I'm not going to read the names on the screen, but I am sure you'll be able to identify them. And these are all stalwarts from multiple domains who essentially guide the development of ONDC. There's been very significant progress that has happened on the network in the last 12 months. So ONDC, this advisory council got established in June 2021. And the first set of integration testing on the network took place in December 2021, where communication was tested between the buyer application and the seller application using the ONDC protocol, but without any physical movement of goods and services. And ONDC also got set up as a Section 8 company in the same year, in the same month, which was in December 21. We went live with the first set of network participants in March 22. And the first test transaction with actual physical delivery of goods and services took place in the month of April. There's been significant expansion of ONDC in various cities and domains that has taken place since then. We've also done a beta launch. What we mean by a beta launch is that ONDC has been opened up for public testing. So there are 16 pin codes in Bangalore, as well as 5 pin codes in Meerut, where the applications are available for the public to try as well. Now, ONDC itself is a Section 8 company which is supported by various institutions which have previously delivered population scale technology programs. We are strongly supported by various public sector, private sector banks, and other entities. And the first set of capital has been raised so that we are able to sustain our operations over the next 3 years. ONDC itself is a non-for-profit organization, and therefore there is no need to give anything back to the investors, but of course be able to sustain its own operations in the long run. This is the pipeline of the current set of network participants who've already joined the ONDC network. There are 25 live platforms that are currently integrated with the network. We've got about 16 applications on the seller side, including GoFrugal, eSamuday, UShop, Seller App, etc. We have 5 buyer applications that are currently live. We've got Paytm, we've got IDFC, Spice Money, Craftsvilla, and various logistic applications as well as 30 plus entities that are currently in final stages of integration, and almost 300 plus other platforms that are also in various stages of integrating with the network. So you are going to see ONDC become the way of e-commerce in the very short run. We are also live with sellers in about 85 plus cities. 1,200 sellers have already joined the network over the last 6 months. Like I explained, we are alpha live in these cities. Therefore, we are testing transactions across all of these cities with these sellers. And there are 2 pin codes, 2 cities, Bangalore and Meerut, where we are open to the public as well. And about 120,000 plus products that are available on the network. That's it from my side as far as the presentation is concerned. Now, one of the things that I would like to tell you is that while this particular session has been more business oriented in nature, if any of you are interested in understanding the ONDC protocol in depth, there are technical briefing sessions that we do for participants every Friday from 11 to 12. I will post the details in the chat as well. So anybody who's interested to understand more in depth about the ONDC protocol and its technical functioning should join this technical session that takes place on every Friday from 11 to 12. And in case anybody has any questions post this session, then please feel free to reach out to us at team@ondc.org and we will be able to answer all your questions. So I'm going to stop presenting now, and in case anybody has any questions, then I will take those.
Thank you, sir. This is Akila from CSA Chennai chapter, sir. So
Yes,
there are few. Are you able to call me like hello, sir?
yes,
Are you
ma'am.
able to? Yes, sir. Here, are you able to hear me?
I am.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sir, I'll first read the questions from the chat box. First question: will ONDC provide performance metrics of buyer platform for the end users to choose the better one?
Yes, absolutely. So when I spoke about the rating and badging mechanism, we will be and the open data that we are developing, there will be certain matrices and open data which we will publish to the public so that they are able to make better choices in terms of the buyer platforms as well as the seller platforms that they want to transact through.
Thank you, sir. Next question. It's from Sundaram Balasubramaniam, sir. Is discoverability discussed similar to CDSL, KYC, KRA?
Sorry, will you be able to explain this to me, maybe Mr. Sundaram, if you can just explain this question to me and then I'll address it.
Sundaram, sir, are you there? Yeah, he's there.
Yeah, he is there. He is there.
Yes. Mr. Sundaram?
Hello.
Yes. Yes,
Are
sir.
you
We are
hearing
able to hear you.
Yes.
No,
Yeah.
I was just trying to figure it out. No, this KYC initiative that government is doing across for all this platform, no, for all our needs, no, as at a centralized level, that is going to give a discoverability to for the service providers to do it at once. Is this discoverability which you are talking for this platform is the one similar to that one?
I will have to check on this. If this is a new initiative, I will have to check on this and come back to you, Mr. Sundaram.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Yes. You've got another question where you mentioned that the buyers and sellers are directly connected using ONDC protocol after search discovery. In this case, would ONDC have the details of the underlying transaction at an atomic level?
More in the I asked this question more in the sense of would like to understand how does this play in terms of the data privacy and other acts that we are
No,
trying
absolutely. So the idea is that ONDC will not have transaction level details of transactions which are happening between the buyer applications and the seller applications. Through the open data framework, ONDC will actually collect aggregated anonymous data from the buyer applications and the seller applications just to be able to monitor the health of the network. But we will not, as the network, we will not be maintaining any, or we will not even have visibility of any transaction level data. Only the buyer applications and the seller applications involved in that transaction will have access to that data.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next question from Sindhu. Ms. Sindhu, what is the incentive for the buyer and seller platforms? What if they start monopolizing?
Yeah, so of course the incentive for buyer and seller platforms is, I mean, of course there are monetary benefits that any buyer and seller platform would have. So a buyer platform is able to charge a buyer finder fee on every transaction that is happening through the network. Similarly, a seller application would also charge the seller on something, either a joining fee or a fee on the transaction which is happening through the network. Now, one of the things that ONDC allows or enables is for any small or big buyer-seller platform to be able to access the entire set of buyers and sellers by becoming a part of the network. And therefore, there will be a large variety of buyers and seller applications which would be available at all times on the network, offering similar benefits to buyers and sellers. So there will be no way for one single entity to be able to monopolize either on the buyer side or on the seller side, because other applications, as soon as that start happening, other applications will come in the market. They will be able to access that entire universe. And the only way that a buyer application or a seller application can truly differentiate themselves is on the basis of the services that they provide to the end buyer and the seller. I hope I was able to clarify that, but if there's any other specific point, then please let me know.
No, this was good. Thanks.
Okay. I'll read the question myself. So the next question was, how do we prevent monopoly? Amazon decides to be a buyer app, seller app. So I think I've already answered that. How are we sure the search results are fair? What if the search results are biased? Now, the way the search result takes place is that it hits the ONDC gateway. ONDC gateway collates all the search results, sends it back to the buyer application. Now, it is completely up to the buyer application to choose the algorithm on the basis of which it wants to display the search results to its buyers. Now, ONDC does not control it, and therefore every buyer application would have a different way in which they would showcase the search results to their buyers. Of course, the idea is that the buyer app would keep its buyers' interest in mind while developing this, because they would not have any one-on-one tie-up, unlike a platform, with the sellers in order to do this. So unlike on a platform where the platform can be bias basis, the sellers that are registered on it, in the ONDC world, a buyer app's complete loyalty is to the buyer, and therefore the algorithms developed by them will be in the favor of the buyer and the way the search results are displayed by them.
Okay, I have a follow-up question here.
Yeah.
So let's say, for example, let's say Amazon decides to be both the buyer platform and the seller platform as well, and it has like a network of sellers that it has. Now, what it can do is it can tweak the algorithm in such a way that it will favor some of the sellers in this platform, and they can offer some incentives. So, won't this kind of tilt what ONDC is trying to solve?
See, the idea is that Amazon would just taking that example and extending it, Amazon would want to join the network once, as a buyer application, it would only be interested in joining the network once there is a network of sellers on ONDC that it is trying to access and enable its buyers to purchase from them. That's the only reason why Amazon would join the ONDC network as a buyer application. Okay. In which case, yes, they could tweak search results to just showcase their own sellers. But there's no USP there, right? So the only reason they would join is when they want to access the sellers which are on the ONDC network as well and allow their buyers to purchase from them.
Okay, got it.
Okay. Who maintains the network? For example, what if the gateway fails? So, of course, ONDC as the organization is responsible for maintaining the ONDC network, and the gateway maintenance also lies under ONDC's responsibility. How does the protocol take into account different terms and conditions? What's the priority on the terms and conditions? Can you explain this to me so that I can address this?
Yes. So, for example, let's say there are two sellers with different terms and conditions. For example, let's say one seller decides I will not accept returns, and the other seller is accepting returns. Would the, for example, would the search results given back to the buyer, would all these be taken into account, or it's plain, or does the terms and condition does not affect the search results at all?
No, so again, it completely depends on the experience that the buyer application is trying to build for its buyer. Okay. There could be buyer applications that want to completely filter out search results where cancellations and returns are not possible. But there would be other buyer applications that would allow that to happen and let the buyer make a choice. So display the information to the buyer that this particular product is not returnable or not cancelable, and the buyer may still choose to buy it. So it is completely up to the buyer applications in terms of how they develop that buyer experience for their end consumers.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. So there is one more question, like, is ONDC an extension of UPI?
So yes, the closest example that you would find of such interoperability created is UPI, and ONDC was in its inception largely modeled on UPI. Of course, UPI and is building on top of that is part of the digital infrastructure, public infrastructure. So ONDC is building on top of that. Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. Next question. Other than building a better user interface, is there any competitive advantage for payment apps? So,
the competitive advantage of a payment app, of course, is the large consumer base that they may have already garnered, and therefore for them to convert it into a e-com consumer is a lot easier. Other than that, offering their own financial products and services to the buyers at the time of checkout is another competitive advantage that a payment app can offer. So a lot of the banks which are a part or are building buyer applications on the network are doing so that they can offer their financial products to the end consumers while making these purchases, be it buy now, pay later, be it any insurances, anything of that nature. That's a competitive advantage that the buyer application can offer as well.
Thank you, sir. One last question. Is there a minimum lock-in period for the buyer or a seller, specifically seller after joining the network?
No, not at all. There is no lock-in period for any buyer or seller on the network or on any of the buyer or seller applications as well.
Thank you, sir. Any more questions from the participants? If you have some queries, you can just unmute yourself and ask our speaker today.
Dhruv, I have one simple question to ask you.
Yeah. Sure.
Basically, I'm very curious to know, so how does this cascade this, the request from an end user to the different seller network? Say you give an example of an ATAs. Okay, there are two types of things. One is the known products, and there are other kinds of known product means manufactured from stable versions, basically sellers. So is this being like is it handled basically like as is it being cataloged in a common way, or is it done something different?
No, so there is a taxonomy which has been developed for, let's say, the grocery domain, and all sellers that are a part of the network have to follow that common ONDC grocery taxonomy. Each of the sellers maintain their own catalog, but of course, like I said, they have to follow a common taxonomy which is consumed by both the buyer application as well as the seller application.
Okay. And for the service or product which is not quite common or which is very unique from the perspective, how does it work actually?
No, so those catalogs have to be developed by the seller applications or the sellers. While there are common, again, this is not a functionality of the ONDC network. There are seller applications that provide catalog as a service for most of the standardized products. But for others, it is the responsibility of the sellers to be able to develop seller or the seller application to develop the catalog on behalf of the seller.
They can develop, but how does it translate into that the common discoverability engine over there? How do you just?
So that mapping has to be done by the seller application once they become a part of the network. So the ONDC taxonomy or the taxonomy that has been developed is a part of the code protocol. And while the applications are integrating with the network, that's something that they need to implement.
Okay. Thank you.
If you want more details on this, my suggestion would be to join the protocol briefing session, which is conducted by ONDC. I put the details in the chat window. It happens every Friday from 11 to 12 p.m., 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. So you can join that and maybe get more clarity on this process there.
Sure.
Yeah. Hi, one small question I have, Ram here. I was the one who asked regarding the lock-in period. See, this is regarding. Is there any currently there is only national, domestic, or from international who wants to buy for their people in India can actually place an order, or vice versa, or it's just currently the logistics is built for only Indian addresses.
So we're currently working on the MVP RAM for that particular use case. So we are working back with 2 or 3 logistic companies that will enable inter-country logistics as well.
Okay.
At the same time, we're also working with buyer applications abroad who will be able to integrate with the network, and there can be a transaction that can take place from a buyer abroad to a seller in India. That's a part. So yes, currently we're working on that MVP. I think it'll take another 2 to 3 months before we are able to demonstrate an actual transaction of this particular use case.
One more question.
Yes.
So earlier, I think when you were discussing the objective of ONDC, it was to, let's say, bring in all of the Kirana sellers on the rural side, right, to onboard the network. So again, how is that going to be achieved here? Because they still need to be tech savvy to onboard to a seller platform, which they would have done, let's say, to onboarding to a platform like Amazon or Flipkart. So how are you going to bring in those set of population into this network?
So the idea, Chinnu, is that we work closely with a set of seller applications that are able to develop these capabilities for small kirana stores and retailers. Today, the large platforms do not have any incentive for getting such kirana stores and small retailers on the network. Here, the idea is to work with a smaller set of platforms on the seller side who will be able to bring these sellers on board, and also work with a set of buyer applications that are able to tap into the rural population, and enable people in rural India to be able to transact in e-commerce as well. So again, the idea is to be able to work with a larger set of buyer and seller platforms that specialize in these particular domains and work with them to enable transactions in these areas.
Okay, by we you mean the non-profit ONDC, right?
ONDC along with the government of India, of course. I mean, given that there is a strong support from the Ministry of Commerce, work closely with them and get this implemented at a large scale across India.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Any more queries?
One of the other things which I've done is in the chat window. Oh, I don't think I put the entire this thing. I'm also posting the URLs of the first 5 seller buyer applications which are live in the ONDC network. If any of you are in Bangalore, Meerut, or even in cities, because there are sellers in about 85 cities, I would request you to please try out a transaction on any one of these applications. And if there's any feedback that you have, I'm also posting a link there to provide us the feedback there. I think it's...
So the tiny URL is not, I think it's say unable to find.
Yeah, no, I think it's not letting me post all of it. I'm just posting the message in 2 shots. Just give me 1 minute. Yeah, there you go. So I think the 5 applications there: Paytm, My Store, Spice Money, Craftsvilla, IDFC First. Please try out these applications. Do try out a transaction if you find a seller near you, and let us know your feedback on the same.
Thank you, sir. Now I request our chair, Mr. TV Kamalakkannan sir, to propose the vote of thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Akila. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to heartily thank Mr. Dhruv for this wonderful presentation today on ONDC. I think it has been a revelation to many of us. We have been hearing about ONDC so far, but today we really understand what exactly it stands for. And first of all, I'd like to congratulate Mr. Dhruv Mandal for rolling out a beta version at a national level in about 1 year, right? I think it was established in September 21. By September 2022, you are here with the beta launch at the national level. It's absolutely wonderful. I mean, I worked in TCS for close to 30 years, but this kind of a rollout in about a year is phenomenal. So thank you very much for sharing your success here with all the participants today. And of course, you had explained to us the entire journey from the conceptualization to the implementation. It was an excellent story. But today, I think it has been a silent revolution. There has not been much hype about it, but I can feel in my heart that over the next 2 years or 3 years, I think ONDC is going to absolutely revolutionize and democratize the market. I remember Thomas Friedman's book, The World is Flat. I think he published in 2005. Today, ONDC tells us that the market is flat. Okay, absolutely does not really differentiate between a Kirana in the corner shop or Amazon or a Reliance or a big basket. It really doesn't differentiate. Anybody and everybody can participate. And the protocol that he explained very nicely, where each seller and buyer and also logistics provider, basically the unbundling of the services that he talked about so nicely is wonderful. So which means that you can almost have infinite number of combinations that you can work out. I mean, for you can have 2 seller and 3 buyers and 2 logistics service providers, and you can pretty much create your own combination. So thank you very much for sharing with us all these principles of this unbundling of services and also the interoperability of all the stakeholders. So really great. And you also walked us through a nice example, lucid example of the Atta story, right? A simple buyer, how can he actually achieve his goals of buying a grocery item using multiple service providers? So wonderful, Mr. Dhruv. And later on, you walked us through the various roles of the network participants, what exactly their duties are, and how it benefits all of them. Okay, not just one. And you also nicely explained why Amazon should join this platform. Because today, Amazon may be the top seller, but then he might have to discover so many services that are available across the world, which are not yet visible to them, right? So this is also going to be a great discovery path for all the stakeholders, on ONDC. And of course, it's advised by a council of luminaries that he had put up. So wonderful. And we are happy to see that it is actually spreading with 85 cities participating in it and 1,200 sellers so far. So it has been a good story. So thank you very much for the captivating captivating presentation and the way you answered insightfully to all the questions that followed. So thank you, Mr. Dhruv. And thank you for joining us today in spite of it being a weekend. And also, I'd like to thank all the organizing units, Hindustan Chamber of Commerce, Computer Society of India, IEEE Computer Society, and ACM Chennai. So thank you all. And I'd like to thank all the participants who joined us today on a Saturday evening. So thank you all very much for joining us. And I'm sure Mr. Dhruv will be in touch, and we would invite you for more any such invigorating discussions later on. So please be in touch with us. So thank you all very much. Have a nice evening.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Dr. Akila, we can probably stop recording, right?
Yes, sir.